IR Today, brought to you by the National Investor Relations Institute, dedicated to advancing global investor relations practices, and Knowledge Partner host, Corporate Board Member.
Welcome to NIRI's IR Today. My name is Jeff Morgan. I'm President and CEO of the National Investor Relations Institute, and today we're here to discuss financial disclosure. NIRI has just released a new standards of disclosure, standards of practice on financial disclosure, and joining me today is Jane McCahon. Jane is Vice President of Corporate Relations for Telephone and Data Systems, and Jane is a longtime NIRI member. She has been chairman of our board, or chairwoman of our board. She's also chaired our Ethics Council. She has been a longtime speaker and is always very highly rated as a speaker. She is also a member of Senior Roundtable. But today, Jane is here representing the Disclosure Task Force, which has worked on this product, and we have just released it. So Jane, welcome. We're delighted you're here.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here, especially to launch and talk about this really important development on the topic of financial disclosure. As we know, financial disclosure is really, at the heart of what IR does, and we know that it's one of the skill sets that can very quickly build a reputation for a company, and with a misstep very quickly can ruin a reputation of a company. All of the various pieces of our disclosure, whether it's structured disclosure around our filings or the less structured areas, our conference calls, webcast investor presentations, press releases, understanding all of that, understanding that the world really views the investor relations officer as the chief disclosure officer. This is a topic we all need to understand and master, both the theories and the practices, and I think this updated standards of practice for disclosure is really going to help all of NIRI do that. Fantastic.
Well, again, we're delighted to have you, and so let's look at this from a 30,000 foot level. What do you see as, why is this so important? And you've sort of mentioned it to the profession, but what do you see, from the standpoint of the disclosure document?
Well, this is really, I think, where NIRI steps in and plays a role that's so important because, for I think since 1996, NIRI has been issuing standards of practice on a lot of different topics, but disclosure, I think, being one that companies all around the country and even around the globe look to NIRI to be a standard setter in this area. And so I think what we do here is provide a foundation for learning about what the rules and regulations are, helping answer the really clear questions around disclosure, but then providing an approach and questions to ask when you're in the gray areas. There's a lot of different areas that just are not clear cut, and this provides examples, it provides case law, it provides a lot of different ways to help investor relations folks approach the topic of disclosure.
Yeah. Well, I'm embarrassed to say the last time we did this was 2004, so that seems like an eternity. The world is changing dramatically, financial markets are changing dramatically, communication mediums are changing dramatically, and we don't want to have that long of a time span go between the next time we release it, and we'll talk about that. Yeah. But what's different in this and what's the same?
Well, I think let's start a little bit with what's the same, because the book opens with a great discussion around the theories around disclosure and some of the concepts around disclosure. And so the issue, materiality hasn't changed. Nope. There's even not, it's defined by some by regulation, mostly by case law, and it's one of those concepts that as an IRO you have to understand. I think investor relations officers sit in such a unique position within a company as the conduit of information back and forth, and so are in a position really unlike anybody else to have kind of your finger on the pulse of what materiality is in any given time. And so, it talks through that. It talks through a lot of the existing rules and regulations that are out there. But then I think, there's been, some of the changes now are around the speed at which our communications travel and the vehicles in which, and the channels in which they travel. So we address social media and discuss, policies around that and how to weave that into your disclosure practice. We talk about the SEC's guidance around using your website as a form of disclosure. We talk about the Dodd-Frank rules around, say, on pay and compensation disclosure and some of those issues. So, we kind of cover the basics, update the basics, but then, also provide that insight into what's new.
Well, I know within the document there's cases and other things. So how is it structured?
It follows, I've done the NIRI intro seminar, which is one of the great programs that NIRI offers, and other pieces that have done in the IR 101 regulation discussion. And so we've kind of tried to take the best of all of that material and structured it around starting with the concepts, starting with the theories, making sure from materiality to differential disclosure, duties to update, duties to correct, and then walk through the rules. What is out there in terms of what we need to follow, whether it's SEC Act rules, whether it's rules from the exchanges, we got to know those, and the various regulations there. And then we walk through structured disclosure around your 10Ks, your 10Qs, your filings, walk through the voluntary disclosures. And again, that's a lot of where the art and science come together, whether it's talking about conference calls or how to respond to rumors and all of that good work. And then we end with a discussion of the case law. And I think that is one area that I think has evolved with both a discussion of what the facts and circumstances were for each case, but then also kind of the lessons learned and what you can take away from that. And so, as a total picture, I think this standards can really walk you through it.
I think part of the value in this is the process by which it was developed, because this is not just a couple people, this is a small community that has really gone through and to help develop this standards of practice, and then we've gone through a vetting process with the membership. So why don't you talk a little bit about the process?
Yep. I think the process that was set up differently this time is going to be critical to kind of the ongoing success of this, because I know NIRI as an organization is really dedicated to make this a living document, because things do change pretty fast, and we can't wait this many years between versions. And so, we've been working on this, I think, for about 1.5 years now, which seems like a long time, but I think all of that work is going to pay off in terms of how we update this going forward. So if I can, I'd love to thank the people that were involved.
Please do.
We brought in a group of attorneys, legal experts, who have kind of picked different sections of the standards to own and to update, and they really, their contributions are significant. There's Brian Brennehy from Skadden Arps, Steve Cook and Michael Zappone from Paul Hastings, Brent Fassett of Cooley, Andrew Moore of Perkins Coie, Lawrence Levins and Marianne Wargis of Cat and Muchin, and Frank Zarb and Liz Krimer of Prosecker Rose. So they all spent a lot of time on this, and we thank them. As long as you spent a lot of time on this, as well as Matt Brush on your staff. And then the working group of the IR practitioners who really made sure that everything coming into here, as well as some of the more practical aspects, were as current as it could be. Derek Cole, the VP of IR and Communications at ARCA Biopharma. He chaired the working group. He gets a lot of credit for that, and he's the current NIRI chair this year. Mary Beth Cassane, principal at Wallach & Associates. She's a current board member, and I know she teaches the IR 101 regulations course. And Maureen Wolf, who's the president and partner at Sharon Merrill Associates, also a former NIRI board chair. So a lot of time, a lot of effort, and it's nice to have a final product.
Yeah, it's great to have a final product, and I think the process, and once you developed your draft, we then put it out to the membership for 45 days, which is our process to vet that. And we've learned that there's a lot of great thoughts out there among the membership that we want to harness. So our goal going forward is to turn this into more of a living document and use open source based technology, like a wiki based environment, where we can put the standards out there, and then as things are changing, people can start adding their thoughts, and then have behind that an expert body of attorneys and practitioners to look at that. And in essence, develop or update on an ongoing basis. And I think that type of thing, we have the standards of practice on disclosure. We also do earnings release and notice and access. We have a lot more that we'd like to do. So as we perfect this process, I think it's going to allow us, from a NIRI standpoint, to really do these standards in a way that makes them very timely, and anytime anybody wants them, they can go and get it. Speaking of which, if you want this as a member, we issued a link to you to where you can download this, and if you want a hard copy, we're using a print-on-demand service and allowing members to access that and print that. And one of the things we feel that standards are so important that this is something that's not just available to the membership, but also to available to non-members, because we feel that we want everybody exposed to this, because we are really the keeper of disclosure in particular in some of these standards. So do you think that type of process is going to make things a lot easier for the future and allow us to not be in this gap of many years before we update them?
Yeah, like I said, the speed and the velocity at which things are moving these days, it's necessary. I mean, it really has to work this way now. And I think, you know, it's going to be the source of a lot of good dialogue among members, among, you know, to be able to bring to your general counsel or to your CFO whenever there's an issue and begin the discussion. And I always, as always, talk to your other NIRI members.
Yep.
There's been so many times over the years where, you know, you have an issue that you're facing and you need a sounding board, and that's kind of what NIRI is all about at the end of the day, is having somebody that you can pick up the phone and ask those questions, because if somebody's been through it before, no need to reinvent the wheel. And so this, I think, will be a great basis for doing that.
Well, and that's very nice, because that is why NIRI exists. We are a 40-plus-year-old organization, and we really have four purposes: providing information, providing a network or a community to have those discussions, providing advocacy, and providing professional development. So, you know, this fits right into our wheelhouse and is why things like this are so important, not only to the investor relations professional, but for the whole industry. So with that, thanks for being with us. You know, I appreciate your thoughts. I appreciate your work on the task force, and we look forward to seeing you on the next IR Today.
Join us again next time for IR Today, brought to you by the National Investor Relations Institute, dedicated to advancing global investor relations practices, and Knowledge Partner host, corporate board member.